We can't share a driveway anymore? Fine. Enjoy your tiny driveway. When my so and I moved into our house some 20 years ago, our neighbors on one side were an elderly husband and wife who we got along with very well. Our two houses shared a driveway that ran from the street to the alley behind the houses, and we each had our own parking area in the back. The driveway was set up so that about 2 feet of it was on our property with the rest on the neighbor's property. The driveway was right up against the neighbor's house and about 8 feet from ours. We all made it a point to not park in the driveway so that we didn't block each other's way and had no problems for 15 years. Sadly, the sweet neighbors died about 5 years ago and their house was bought by Mike, a man who regularly bought old houses to rent or resell and who clearly didn't care about anything except profit. The first time that we ever met Mike was right after a car had hit our house. The driver had a stroke and lost control of his car while driving down our street. The front of his car was actually inside of our house. So here we are, freaking out because a car is literally sticking out of our house, surrounded by a crowd of onlookers, police, and emergency workers when Mike saunters over and introduces himself by saying that the whole driveway plus part of our garage are on his property. We tell him that he's wrong, but that this is not the time to discuss it and we'll get back to him later. We do some investigating and discover that the property line is exactly where we knew it to be and that the map Mike was using had the property line overlay off by about 2 feet. Nevertheless, Mike continues to harass us and tell us that we can't use the driveway any longer because he's going to rent the place out and it would be a liability to have us driving on his property. Fine. We'd often talked about putting in our own driveway, so now was as good a time as any. Mike was quite pleased when we told him that. At least he was until he learned that the new driveway was going in right next to his driveway, along our property line. He tried to talk us into putting the driveway on the other side of our house, obviously so that he would still have use of the full existing driveway which sat 2 feet onto our property. The look on Mike's face when he saw where the surveyor drew our property line was absolutely priceless. The line left just barely enough room for a car to fit on his side, and he couldn't widen his driveway because it already ran right next to his house. So we used a chunk of our lawn on that side to install a nice wide driveway with Riverstone gravel, so that it would be obvious where our driveway ended and Mike's very narrow blacktop driveway began. Mike never spoke to us again. Edit to answer a few questions. Mike rented the house to a nice mom with 3 kids shortly after we put the driveway in. She bought the house from Mike last year and we get along great. I give them produce, milk, and eggs whenever I have extras and her kids are very polite. Their driveway is still wide enough to drive through, and they just park in the spaces at the back of their house. So that's not a problem for them. TL. Doctor. New neighbor says we can't share a driveway anymore and ends up with a much smaller drive because of property lines. Put some rocks on the property line to mark your perimeter winking face. Mike never spoke to you again? Worth it. Do you get along with the renters? Mutual driveways are the worst if you don't have considerate neighbors. We share a driveway with a person who is terrible at parking and house maintenance. They constantly complain of our car is parked too close to their side whenever I park it perfectly in the middle. Backup camera FTW. Because I know her kid might scratch our car. But when it's her month, we alternate who parks in driveway versus street. She parks it too far forward that I can barely get my bike or bike trailer out. After 9 years of living here and half of that trying to be polite, We are moving to a new place 1 block east. It's bigger, older, and a fucking private drive. The classic example of landlords who do not care, even check the actual plans etc. when getting a property just because it at the moment looks like it's fine and dandy, and after the dust settles, have to either pucker up 4 to 5 figure amount to have a working alternative, or like in this case, facepalm and settle with Prius or smaller size spot. Can't just trust the tax maps. My neighbor is trying something similar, so we're getting a survey. We have an old lady who lives next to us. My brother and I bought our house together. We always would snow blow her driveway, help her with other chores. I even went over and fixed her toilet, her laptop, etc. My brother, when blocked in our driveway, would occasionally drive over our lawn, then out her driveway, which abuts our backyard lawn. One day we received this rambling chicken scratch letter signed by her and 2 of her geriatric friends as witnesses to not use her property. That's fine. It's her right. Just hope your 80-year-old witnesses are willing to come over and shovel your driveway. Because now I won't even piss on your house to put it out if it were on fire. Nicely done. My parents had the same issue with a shared driveway and a neighbor's home motorcycle continuous repair shop. It went to court and they ordered a fence down the property line. My father refused to pay for his half even though he was ordered to. He wrote a bunch of letters and kept arguing, and the city gave up on him. Neighbors across the street from where I used to live had a shared driveway situation. The houses were very close together and the driveway was in between them, and there was literally just enough room for a car to get in between the houses. The 2 houses shared this driveway with no problem for over 50 years. Then one day one of the houses changes hands and those new people decide that it is their driveway. Many arguments later, one of them finally calls out a surveyor who declares that the property line is directly down the middle of the driveway. The people who have been living there for a long time tried to work out a deal with the new people. For example, they could alternate weeks or months that each one got to use the driveway. New people refused and then took it a step further and installed metal poles right down the middle of the driveway so that nobody could use it. This vindictive MFER not only screwed himself out of use of the driveway, but now nobody could use. He had to park on the street, and the 3 cars from the other house had to park on the street in an already tight area, so the whole neighborhood was affected by his selfish decision. Good God, I hate petty neighbors. In Facebook Messenger we have a residents group chat to warn each other about the local traffic parking cops who are diligent and unrelenting. Our street is a one-way street, so parking is at a premium on the road. On another note, we all offer free stuff or items for sale in the residents chat first, before we advertise it on public social media. Last year in lockdown there was a popular trading system. So, when I spent 3 hours baking a chocolate cheesecake, I asked for swapsies. A bunch of fresh carrots was one offering. £1 to the local Cats Protection League was another. And someone else gave me 2 half-full jars of flavored coffee she didn't like. I adore my local community. Many years ago, my parents shared a driveway with their neighbors on the one side. The property line was on an angle, so the first triangular half of the driveway was mostly the neighbors and the second triangular half was my parents'. My parents had many disagreements with those neighbors, and a similar kind of thing occurred. They said my parents couldn't use the first half of the driveway. My parents agreed, and stopped using it, parking on the other side of the house instead. However, they also wouldn't let the neighbors use the back half of the driveway. Eventually, The neighbors offered to buy the triangular back half of the driveway from my parents. My parents graciously sold it to them. The neighbors didn't really have much choice, since they could only fit one of their 3 vehicles in the front sliver. Those neighbors have since moved away. I don't get people who are so short-sighted. They basically had a full driveway but just had to share. My parents didn't get in their way. You win, Mike loses. Karma at work. A friend in Arizona had a similar incident, but he chose a different path. Their driveway was a 50-50 share. He had the concrete on his side of the property taken out. A bunch of us helped. He then put in a concrete wall on the property line. I then helped put in a new driveway to the backyard parking. In his case it was the entire backyard, car mechanic. He got all permits and cleared the work before he started. The neighbors, landlord squalled and tried to fight in court. I believe that including court costs he spent about $20,000 and ended up with a nice bike path to his parking area. I was happy to help with that job. Is this Mike Litteris, the homeowner we see occasionally? I'd love to see a picture of this, at least a Google Maps image or something. Picture? Professional landlords are some of the biggest jackasses on the planet that you'll ever meet. This was very satisfying to read. It's been a rough week, so I really needed a good story of some wholesome street justice. Much thanks. I'm sure you were heartbroken to be deprived of association with Mike, huh? That man sounds like a piping hot poopy.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Ericast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.